Steelers Nation, we are less than 1 week away from the NFL draft, and we still have an answer at quarterback. So I got none other than Lauren WKR with us today to discuss what the Steelers should do at quarterback, the elephant in the room that is Aaron Rodgers, and a bunch of other things to talk about the Pittsburgh Steelers. Let's get into it. Again, but the elephant in the room, the most glaring need is quarterback, because I see till I'm blue in the face that if you don't have a quarterback, you don't have anything in this league these days.
This is true. This is true.
So that would lead me into the next question, and we talked about him in the intro, and he's been on TV today talking all kind of craziness. So, it's high time to talk about what are your thoughts on Aaron Rodgers and him potentially joining the Steelers.
Oh gosh, like there's so many different avenues that I could go down with this whole Aaron Rodgers thing, and I would say the phrase that ultimately comes to mind is, "What are we doing?" Right?
I like that.
What are we doing? I mean, obviously, if this were the Kevin Colbert area, obviously this wouldn't even be a conversation, And I understand that Omar, he wants to do things his way. But I think in some regard, he's kind of showing his cards a little too much. I guess I just don't understand what the attraction is with Rodgers and why we feel like he would be a good fit as a Pittsburgh Steeler. That aside, obviously Aaron Rodgers was on the Pat McAfee show today. Mm-hmm. And, prior to him coming out of, his silence, right. His hiding his silence, there was rumors left and right. I mean, obviously we know that there was conversation with Rodgers and the Steelers, and then there was conversation about, him potentially joining the Vikings and Kevin O'Connell. And then there was speculation about, him possibly being a New Orleans Saint, because I guess Derek Carr isn't 100% in terms of possibly having an injury or something like that. And so, and then there was talk, well, if he's not going to play for a Super Bowl contender, if he's not going to be able to play for a Super Bowl contender, then he's just not going to play at all. And so when he was on the Pat McAfee show, he kind of, obviously everyone's tuned in because we want to know, right? Like, right. This is, we've been conditioned to think and believe that when Aaron Rodgers gets on the Pat McAfee show and it has to do with where he's playing next, it's going to be on the Pat McAfee show. That's the understanding that we have. That's what he did with the Jets. He was very adamant. He was very concise and clear in that he wanted to play for the New York Jets. And so, the question looms, what the heck, what the freak is taking so long? Like, what is taking so long for this man to make a decision? And so he kind of went into the fact that, it was his sister that sort of talked him into joining the Pat McAfee show and giving everyone an update, more so to debunk the rumors. He confirmed that his interest in Minnesota and Minnesota's potential interest in him was not true. Other rumors regarding, being, joining the Giants and the Saints, all those rumors were not true. He also did say that he was trying very, very hard to keep the meeting with the Steelers under wraps. That was something that he did not want to get out, to the point where he didn't even fly in to Pittsburgh's airport. He flew in from a different airport and then drove to the facility in some Chevy Malibu or something like that. And then I think he got to the facility, he was spotted, and the next thing you knew, like, media flocked to the facility, and obviously the cat was out of the bag. Right. Exactly. The cat was out of the bag that he was there. And so, typical smokescreen, meeting went great. He's got admiration for Mike Tomlin. But I'm kind of sidetracking here. One thing that he did also talk about, because, with Rodgers, he's going to find a way to, expose people or create, he's going to find a way to tell his side of the story, good or bad. And I thought it was interesting when he talked about how things ended with the Jets.
Mm.
And I'm going to be paraphrasing quite a bit, but he flew out to the Jets facility on his own dime, and he initially met with Aaron Glenn first. And I guess they were, having a conversation. Mind you, they don't know each other, right? They've never worked with each other. They don't know each other. And so obviously this is something that, Aaron knew was coming in terms of just having a conversation about next steps, right? And so he said that they were talking briefly, and then Aaron got up and he left the room. And
Brandon got a GM.
Yes. He brought the GM back into the room. And so, I guess he thought that was kind of weird. And so Rodgers started talking to the GM, and then he said that Glenn sort of like leaned over a piece of paper or leaned over the table and said, "So do you want to play football?" And Rodgers
the GM said that, but go ahead though. Yeah, I think the GM said that.
Actually, I thought I thought Glenn had said that. I thought Glenn had asked him if he wanted to play football.
Yeah, I could be wrong, but I think I was reading one of the posts that Adam Schefter had posted. He was saying something about the GM when he came into the room. He asked him that one question, and then they basically told him after that they're moving on. I think that was
right. He answered the question saying that he was interested, and that they essentially told him that they were moving on.
Right.
And there were some other things that were said in terms of, I'm assuming that this is what Glenn said. I'll have to go back and watch the tape, but basically said that he doesn't want to be in a meeting room or and talking about something specific, and then everyone turning around and looking at Rodgers. And Rodgers was kind of taken back by that and said, so do you think that I would somehow, supersede, whatever it is that you're trying to do, or, whatever precedent that you're trying to set? And Rodgers was just like, I don't know you. And Aaron Glenn was like, well, I don't know you either. And Rodgers responded and said, exactly, which is why I flew out here, to, I guess, get to know you. But essentially, from the way it was understood, was that they brought him out there to discuss how he wanted to handle the media in terms of them moving on from him. I personally think that could have been a phone call. And Aaron Rodgers, I listen, I'm not an Aaron Rodgers stan. He's done some things that I don't agree with in terms of how he's handled things, but I do think that Glenn and the GM definitely could have handled that differently. I'll have to go back and watch that tape, because I thought he said that Glenn had reached over and asked him if he wanted to play football. But my thing is that, you knew
on a post I read, it's kind of convoluted because they only, it's weird. Yeah, because it says that, he went and got a GM, they both sat down. He said going through, having this long conversation, and 20 seconds into it, and he and Glenn say, you want to play football? I think they might have said it together based upon how
yeah.
So they both iterated, which, what are your plans here? And I think that they kind of are harkening back to the Green Bay situation and how they, that ended. And they basically were saying, we're not going to play this non-committal game with you. We're moving forward and we want to plan for the future. And, if you're on the fence and you're doing this jostling, we're just not going to deal with it. We're going to move on. Now, how you handle it, do you bring somebody in and tell you? It's weird because some people say, I would rather tell you face to face that we're moving on from you. Or some people would say, I just call me and would save me the time and the trouble coming out there. It just depends on who you are and how you deal with things.
Right.
People are face to face, man to man people. Some people are, I'll just pick up the phone and call you and say, hey, we're moving on. It was nice knowing you. So who knows? But
yeah. I mean, I think in a situation like this, like if you ultimately know that you are not going to roll with Aaron, I mean, I kind of got the impression that they weren't going to roll with Aaron, because when Glenn was hired, the question was asked to Woody, what the plan was at quarterback, and Woody pretty much said that I am on board with whatever it is that the coach and GM wants to do. Like, he didn't say yes, he didn't say no, he just referred to, I'm going to do whatever it is that they want to do. So that, in my mind, kind of gave me some thought that they are going to move on from Rodgers. And I think the same question was asked to Aaron Glenn when he did his opening coach press conference or whatever, introductory as the coach. And he kind of said something to the effect of, I can't remember exactly what he said, but it was something similar. Like, we haven't talked to Rodgers. We plan to have a conversation with him. There was nothing concise, right? There was nothing that solidified the fact that they were going to be willing to work with him and go into the 2025 season with him as their starting quarterback. So for me and my surmise, I feel like the tone has always been there that they were moving on from Rodgers. And then when he said what he said today, assuming that that's true, because again, we've only gotten Rodgers' story of this. This is the first time the entire world has heard anything in terms of, the dialogue that he had with the Jets. So assuming that what Rodgers said is true, I personally feel like they just could have given it. They could have gave him a phone call and said, hey, we're moving on. I just, he said Rodgers did say what he thought was going to be like a few hour conversation ended up being 15, 20 minutes.
Right.
Like it was done and over with in a very, very, very short amount of time from what he initially expected. So, but going back to the Steelers, I just wanted to share that in case anyone didn't know that Rodgers spoke today, and these were some of the contents in which he spoke about. But, I just don't, this feels like a reach, right? This feels like a reach. I mean, we had Russ, we had Justin. We told Justin that he could exercise his options with other teams. He went to the Jets.
Ironically, going to go to the Jets, right?
Yeah, he goes to the Jets. And then as far as Russ goes, I don't know this to be true, but there was always speculation that Russ was going to want a certain amount of money. And I think that knowing the Steelers had a very high interest in had a high interest in Rodgers, they just weren't going to pay him that, because I do think it's telling that I think Russ is on a 1-year deal with the Jets, and I want to say it's for like
Giants,
the Giants. I'm sorry, he's on a 1-year deal with the Giants, and I want to say it's for like 20.
And I mean that it might like around about 10, but yeah, it's not a lucrative contract at all.
Yeah. I don't know. I just, where I'm at, yes, we do need a quarterback. I just don't understand this whole fascination and this whole infatuation with Aaron Rodgers. He did, going back to, when he was on the Pat McAfee show, he did say that, the Steelers told him that take as much time as you need, but I don't know that the Steelers thought that he was going to take this long. Like the draft is next week. The way the NFL works, and this is just my personal opinion, we need to move on. We need to move on because Rodgers also did mention the fact that he's just got a lot of personal stuff going on. Like he said that he's in a significant, he's got a significant other. He's in a serious relationship. There are people within his inner circle that need him. He didn't really, dive into the specifics of what that was. I don't know if that was financial. I don't know if that was, emotional. I don't know. I really don't know what that was, but he constantly insinuated that he's just got a lot going on. And I don't see this being any different than real life situations. If you are on a job and you have a lot going on, what is your boss going to tell you? Take care of yourself. Right. Take care of whatever it is that you need to do, right? Or if you are in a job interview and it might require you to move or go into a different, location that's quite some distance. You're essentially uprooting your life so that you can do that job. If you've got all these other factors going on, they're not going to they're not going to be upset. They're going to say, hey, take care of you, right? Because at the end of the day, they don't want whatever could potentially come with that you are trying to maneuver through from a personal standpoint. And so I just think that it's best for both parties to just move on. I think Aaron Rodgers should retire. I really do.
I'm glad you said that, because I wholeheartedly agree that he should retire. I'm done playing with this game, playing this game back and forth. You got stuff going on, then fine. Yes, handle your business and all that good jazz. However, companies are going to do one thing after a while. They're going to move on and go in a different direction.
Yes.
So that's what the Steelers should do at this moment, and they should be looking into the draft, what their future should hold in regards to what their quarterback should be.
Exactly.
And just this whole jostling back and forth. When you and I both know that Rodgers is not a long-term solution anyway.
No, he's not.
You're basically renting him year to year, and he may play this year and decide he not want to play next year. We don't know.
Right.
We don't know exactly what his mindset is from year to year, day to day, even for my money.
Exactly. So, I just don't like the fact that we, as the Steelers organization, have just put all of our eggs in one basket with this.
I agree with that.
And it can't. I can't help but think that we are going to draft a quarterback. I'm hoping that we don't reach, That's, I know we're going to talk about that next. I'm hoping that we don't reach, but it's very clear, considering we've gotten no decision from Rodgers because of all the life things that he's dealing with presently. We have to do something, we have to do something until we get this right.
Stay tuned for part 3 of our Steelers series, where we discuss what the Steelers should do in the draft on Thursday night. And remember to subscribe to never miss an upload.